is ready to go. Talking to the people you want to know. One-on-one. Get the story and have some fun with Red Palmer. And now, the most trusted name in radio, Red Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves. Hello, this is Red Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves. How are you doing today? Jill Cohen is Jewish, yet she believes in Jesus. But most importantly, she's adopted. And she's written a new book, Do You Think About Me on My Birthday? Jill is a good friend of the show. You've been coming on the show for over 10 years. How are you, Jill?
I'm doing great, Red. How are you?
Okay, Jill is a journalist, and she's been, usually we talk politics, but today we're going to be talking about something that will touch. If you know anybody that's been adopted or is thinking about adoption, or if you're adopted, this is a show you won't want to miss. So thanks for coming out. You've been waiting quite a while to write this book, Do You Think About Me on My Birthday? And as you can see, the cover that's right in front of everybody, mind-blowing adoption story by Jill Cohen. Why did you wait so long to put this out? You've been thinking about it for years, right?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. So this story actually, as an adopted child, I didn't really think that much of being adopted. It was just a part of my life and part of who I was. My brother and sister were also adopted, and it was just life for us. And then when I was in college, a man showed up in my dorm room who turned out to be my biological father. And that's how my story is different than most adoptee stories. My story would be unremarkable if it weren't for the fact that one day I woke up to find that I had this other family that I knew nothing about and never expected them to come into my life. If anything, I thought I would go looking for them. When you're adopted and you're adopted your whole life, you make up these stories about these people who, gave you up for adoption. You don't know why, you don't know who they are, you don't know who you are in a way. But for me, all of a sudden, I was faced with this reality of this person who turns out had been stalking me my whole life. So so my story is much different than most adoptees' story. And my brother and sister, nothing like that has happened to them. And they do look at my story like, wow, Jill, what's that?
Now, the stalking, I have no idea about your story. I'm about to learn with everybody else, but stalking, now, I can understand if I had a daughter that I'm going to be looking around the corner if I could, and maybe I feel like I'm not supposed to disturb her life. Was it that? Was it because he wanted to know his daughter? Or how do you differentiate stalking from, wanting to keep up with you?
Yeah, so it was a little bit more detailed than that in my story. My story was very different because from the time that I was given up for adoption and I was given to the Jewish Family and Children's Services. So that's very common. In this country, you either went through Jewish Family and Children's or you went through Catholic Services or you went through a private adoption of some kind. But so I went through Jewish Family and Children's. My mother was not Jewish. My mother was actually Christian, and my father, though, was Jewish. And my mother believed that I would have a good life if I was given to a Jewish family. And she thought they would accept me because I did have Jewish blood. Well, it didn't really even matter to them because they did convert me to Judaism as an infant. I was taken to what they call a mikvah. It's like a baptism. So I was baptized to be as Jewish as any Jew born to a Jewish woman. And my parents were told that I could even marry an Orthodox Jew if I wanted to, because I was this Jewish now because of the
Speaking of Orthodox Jews, did you know that the woman is so revered in the Orthodox or the Hasidic Jewish families that if you're married, you're a man, and your wife dies, you have children, they'll give you 2 months. After 2 months, they take the children out of the home, and they're not to return until there's a mother figure living in the house. That's how important the mother is in the Jewish household. My mother always said, the woman is the center of the household. There's little doubt about that.
It's
Women set the
matriarchal.
pace in the household.
Yeah.
Then they set the pace out there on the outside world.
Right.
But it's that's how they esteem it. I want the people to know just very quickly that I can relate to this, of course, because my brother, before he drowned on 911, said, "Don't tell mom, but I believe I have a daughter somewhere." He'd had an affair at 17 with a little Jewish girl, Debbie Dorfman, and she was sent off to a home for unwed mothers. Had the baby. Back then, it was a lot of shame in the early 1960s.
That's
so
right.
She was sent away, and they broke him up. He really loved her. There's no doubt. We have she now, the daughter, has the letters and things, and it's amazing how much he loved her and wanted to work out. But he was the kind of guy that would never tell you had a broken heart. And then she contacted us 2 years after his death. She has 2 sons, Eli and Jonah, and a wonderful husband named Joel.
That's huge, Brett. That's huge. You know, family is everything. And when you're adopted and you grow up and you are told that you have a family and you are not to ever meet them,
that's terrible.
Yes, it is. It is terrible.
Here's the kicker. So it's 11 years later. I'm going in to get a massage some afternoon, and the girl says to me, the lady says, Kathy says, "How are you?" I said, "Well, I'm not too good today because I kind of wish I'd had children, you know." So the phone rings. It's my niece, and she says, "Hold on to your hat here." She said, "Uncle Rat." I'm Uncle Rat now, which is very, that's a great title. Uncle Rat, Scott also had a son. And it was with Linda Leo. I said, "Yeah, Linda, they lived together in the summer of 1969. We all went to Woodstock together." And so now and he has 2 boys the same age as hers. So it's pretty wild. He's pretty sensitive about this adoption thing, because I guess there's a lot of what do you call it, stuff behind you, tin cans hanging on to you with this whole feeling of maybe rejection. I mean, I don't even know it enough to talk about it. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or get anybody mad at me, so if you want to talk about that.
Definitely. I'd love to talk about that, because when you are adopted, you are told that you were given up for adoption. In fact, your adoption papers say on them, mine do anyway, they say relinquishment. And what is a relinquishment? It's giving something away that you'll never get it back. And it seems you're told as an adopted child that this is a gift, that you have just received something very special and wonderful. You have a family. Your family wants you so badly. They love you so much. And that is so great. And it's a good feeling to know that you were chosen. And I put chosen in air quotes because, in my case, I mean, my parents went to an adoption agency and they gave me to them. My parents didn't choose me. The adoption agency made the choice. The adoption agency took my background, matched it up with these people. And there was actually a little girl who was born, I think, either the same day I was or before, one day or after or before, I don't know. And her name was Julie. And, I could be Julie as easily as I could be Jill. So, what were the reasons they gave Julie to the Solomons and they gave me to the Cohens? Who knows? That was a choice that was made.
Do you love the Cohens? Do they love you?
Yeah. Oh, so much. I was raised so wonderfully in a wonderful family. I love my brother and sister. The 3 of us are very close. Our parents have passed away. My mother died in 2013 and my father died in 2006. And it was a wonderful experience growing up with them. They were really, really great parents. And the bad thing that happened was that my parents got divorced when I was 17 years old. And that was the kicker that really set off this guy who was my father. He claimed that the reason he came to look for me was because he found out my parents were getting divorced and he thought I might need him. It was the last thing I needed, actually. But and he also came into my life under cover. He lied about who he was. He didn't tell me. And he pretended he was friends with my family. And I could check that out immediately. I was very close with my family. And I knew everybody who was friends with my parents. And so when this man came into my dorm one day and threw all these crazy stories, I didn't know who he was, but he gave me a clue. He told me, or he asked me if I played the piano. And I said, no, I don't play the piano. And I took piano lessons when I was young, but I don't play the piano. And he got really agitated about that. Like, why don't you play the piano? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. Whatever, you know? And he was really weird about it. That's what tipped me off, because I did know that about him. My mother, when I was about 10 years old, gave me a piece of paper that gave me some details about my biological parents because I was asking questions. And one of those details was that he was a classic trained pianist.
Oh, he was a class. Oh, so that gave you okay. Now,
Yeah.
but you seem to be a little vitriolic towards him, and I mean, I'm looking from my point of view, because if I've been,
I understand. Yeah, totally.
Let a daughter go, but had I done that,
I know.
I
I would.
Two things he did wrong. One thing is he lied.
Right.
Never lied.
Right.
To women, because they set up the whole base. If you lie, then they can't trust anything.
Exactly.
It's like Jesus said. He said, "No liar shall enter the kingdom of God." Because the devil is a liar, the father of all lies. And if somebody's a liar, you don't know when they're lying or when they're not lying. It's better to be a thief than to be a liar.
True, and that's what my book is about lying to children. Because, I mean, what happened in my world was I was 17 and it turned out that my father, who I respected more than anyone in the whole world, he was a doctor, he was a plastic surgeon, he was quite famous in Pittsburgh. He was on TV all the time doing the TV shows and stuff. He was a really cool guy and everybody knew him. And when I found out that he was cheating on my mother, I mean, he wasn't just cheating on my mother, he was cheating on our family. We would wait until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night to eat dinner because we thought Dad was, help saving someone's life. Instead, he was with this woman,
Which father is this?
The father who raised me, my dad who raised me. His name was Dr. Bernie Cohen. And I don't know. My book, I've taken out names because I don't want to tell other people's stories. That's the thing about my book. You asked why it took so long. It's because it's so personal. It's a story about not just my life, but it's a story about the lives of these people who I didn't even know, who gave me up for adoption. And it's a story of my parents who had a horrible divorce.
Well, I'm surprised that you like men at all. You've been put through the ringer when it comes to your adopted dad, to your real dad. And then recently, of course, you were very much in love with your husband.
Yes.
And I think he died, was it 2 years ago?
He died almost 2 years ago.
And I mean, because you were all over the internet with him, you two traveling, just being together, and you seemed to be in the center of joy together. I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
You seem to be particularly a sweetheart of a man, but your luck with men hasn't been so good, has it?
No, but you know who my man is now? I'm desperately in love with the Lord. I love Jesus so much.
He says in the scriptures he is the husband to the widow.
Yes, he is my husband. Yes, he is definitely my husband now. I don't have any desire to date. I don't want to get involved with any other men ever again. To tell you the truth, I'm done.
See, let's say I can take Jesus or a man, Jesus.
Right. I mean,
I'll tell you one thing.
I'm good.
He will be faithful to that if you call him on it. He says,
I know.
Bring me to remembrance of my promises. And I, of course, lost my dad very young. And anyway, I always say to him, I say, you promised you're the father to the orphan. And I can just see him up in heaven going, oy vey, here he is again. I got to bless this guy because he won't leave me alone.
Well, that's it, right.
Bring you to remembrance of your promises. And if you ask people on the outside, I lived a good life, a life of great intervention, and I think it's because of that.
Of course it is. And look at me. I mean, I had two fathers, who didn't do very right by me, but who is my real father? God is my father. He's the best father I could ever have. And he made sure that I got through all of these scallywags and liars and con men and thieves and whatever. So I'm at the point where, I was with Ray for 4 years. We were married for just 11 months before he passed away. But those were the best times I ever had. And that was the best relationship I've ever had with a man, even though at the end he was no longer my husband. He became my baby. And I had to, care for
I didn't
him.
realize he became an invalid at the end.
Yeah, he became my baby in the end. And I sent him to the Lord. And I learned a lot from that relationship, and I learned that love doesn't have anything to do with sex. It's really not about that. You can, when I was with Ray, he had prostate cancer. And I don't want to get into too many details. I just want to say our love was so deep and we were so close. And I never ever worried about, anything really when I was with him. He was mine and I was his. And and I sent him to the Lord, and then now I know what a really good relationship looks like, thank goodness, because I was raised with a lot of craziness and questions, and I thought that my parents had a good marriage, and then I found out that was really all a lie. And then this man shows up and I find out, okay, so the reason you think I'm maybe not so kind towards him is because the fact is he has been stalking me my entire life. He literally made my mother, my biological mother, go to the adoption agency or whatever legal means had to be taken every year to make sure that my papers didn't get put into the archives. Things go into archives within like 5-10 years, and
what are the ramifications of going into archives? I don't even know what archives are.
Yeah, archives are adoption papers. You got papers on you. We all have these papers on us. And in fact, in Pennsylvania, there's this place called Iron Mountain. All your papers go there, by the way. And I know mine do as a former Pennsylvania girl. But anyway, when your adoption papers get sent into the archives, it's going to be hard to retrieve them. It's not easy to get stuff out of Iron Mountain or whatever. It's there, but it's not like readily accessible. So he is an attorney, my father, my biological father, and he made sure that my papers would not go into those archives so that he could get them when he needed them. And he would never tell me how he did it, but he found out who I was. And that was illegal. He never should have been able to find out who I was. But he did. And he had a private detective finding me. Like he found out my name or whatever. Then he had a private...
Let me ask you this though. I mean, maybe I'm a dummy, but I would have been complimented that, because Jesus made it very clear to me when I became a Christian. He said, I chose you. You did not choose me. And later on, the ramifications of that is, it's wonderful. So he's seeking you, which is complimentary, I guess. I just don't know why the negative side to this.
So
were you angry with him because you were adopted? Or?
No. Yes, in a way, I was adopted because of him, because he had a plan, and my mother told me this. He didn't like babies, and he didn't want to have anything to do with a young baby or a toddler. He wanted to find a child who was about 10 years old that he could raise to a magnificent adulthood. And he had there was this guy living in the mountains of Colorado, and he had something called a brain trust. And if I had not been given up for adoption, I may well have been raised in a brain trust in the mountains of Colorado, like a cult, if you will. Like, think Jeffrey Epstein. Think about all these nefarious critters who take women and babies and children and do stuff to them. And that was going to be my future. This man was kind of diabolical in his plans for children, or for me. And he also was disappointed that I wasn't a boy. He wanted a boy that he could raise to a magnificent adulthood, but I was a girl, so it wasn't that important. But anyway, he had this plan for me, and he scared my mother so much that she knew that, first of all, she was not going to marry him because he was a liar, and he was telling her things that weren't true. He was cheating on her. He told me this too. He was cheating on her with another woman while she was pregnant with me. And he was just a kind of a con man, really. And I mean, everything that he did was in a way to I don't know, to rule people's lives, to kind of control other people. And when I met him, I realized that he's this kind of a person. And you'll see in the book, I've changed all the names to protect him, if you will, and to protect other people. But you'll see from the way that he talks, he's very condescending towards his own wife. He's condescending towards me. He has all of these things built up in his mind about the kind of person I must be, and I understand that. And in the beginning, I was grateful that somebody came and looked for me, because I am a very curious person, and I'm a journalist, and that's my life, is finding out the
Hold on.
truth.
Now, I'm wondering if that's why you became an investigative reporter, because all your life has been a mystery.
Well,
It's just like the title of your book. Do you think about me on my
yes,
birthday? So
yes.
and I'm sure she did.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why the book is called that. It's even when I met her, that was one of the first questions I had. Did you think about me on my birthday? That's what I always wondered. And my birthday's always been a really big deal to me, because people would be like, why is your birthday such a big deal? Like, who cares? And I could never explain that that's the day I lost my mother. I mean, I was taken away from her at birth. And so for me, that's kind of an awful day. Now, am I making you cry, or are you having eye problems over there?
No, but I a little bit of something in my eye about
Okay.
that. I was touched earlier on, but I want so we'll continue talking.
But I'm just saying that this guy, he made my mother afraid for my future, and she knew that if she kept me, that he would take me away from her, and um, he would ruin my relationship with her, and maybe I would not be a normal person, because I would be maybe living in this camp. I don't know, who knows what he had. All these plans, and they weren't the plans of a loving father. They were the plans of a power hungry dictator. So I don't know about it, but I know that my mother didn't want that kind of future for me, and she didn't want to have a baby that she would then have to give away and lose. And unfortunately, she still had to go through that. She did replace me with a baby when I was, well, 3 years later. She had a daughter, and she told me that was my replacement. And she's wonderful. So I have a sister, and I love her so much. And because of
Get along.
yeah, because of this man, I mean, I am not kind towards him, just in the thought that he's a manipulative person who did try to puppeteer me and other people. And he even went on to do that with my son. He tried to ruin my relationship with my son. He's not a person I want anything to do
Why would
with.
he want to ruin your relationship with his son?
That's it's a good question. I think it might be jealousy, and it could be the fact that I never told him I had a son, because this is not in the book. In fact, I'm writing another book that's a sequel to this book. And in that book, you'll find out that I basically kicked this man out of my life. He would call my parents poor fools, and he would say that my wanting to have a life of a beautiful home and beautiful children and a husband and all that, he'd say that's for poor fools, that's for slobs and things like that. He talked in ways that I didn't understand, and I didn't appreciate, and I'm not that kind of a person. So he travels the world. He considers himself to be like a Rockefeller. He flies airplanes. He has this wife. He never had any children after me. So I don't know. This guy is probably another reason it took me this long to publish a book. Is I'm not going to say I'm afraid of him, but I know he's out there, and if he stalked me before, I'm pretty sure he's still stalking me. And like I
Well,
said,
he's probably going to watch. He'll probably see this broadcast.
he probably will, and that's fine with me, and he can do what he wants with it. I'm not going to live my life anymore being worried about what his reaction might be to the story that he plays a part in. And I changed.
Let me ask you this: we all have the chance of forgiveness and repentance.
Sure.
What if this guy had a conversion and believed in Jesus and everything's washed away and it's a new beginning? There's always that possibility. How would you be able to differentiate?
I would love it. I would love it. I would love the chance to be reconciled with all of this bad blood, if you will, and that's what it is. It's some bad blood, and I don't know how to fix it. If the Lord wants it fixed, He'll make sure that it is fixed, and maybe my book will help with that. I don't know, but I have. First, I put off publishing this book because my mother that raised me, she didn't want to think about me having another family. And she was very jealous that I had this other mother. And she really kind of hated it. And she never met her, which I thought was really sad because the mother that gave me up had nothing but gratitude that Elaine Cohen took such good care of me. Now I'm going to cry. I miss her so much. She was the best mother that I could have. You know, the Lord is so good. He's so good. He gave me an English teacher. He told me that I was a writer, and I became a writer not because of my mysterious story read. That's not why. It was because when I was, okay, calm. When I was 10 years old, and I feel like everything happened when I was 10 years old. When I was 10 years old, I had a revelation. Like the Lord, I don't know if He came to me or how this happened. I just know that I was told, you need to be a writer. That's your job. You're going to be a writer. And I love to read. And my greatest, my idol was the Little House on the Prairie writer, Laura Ingalls Wilder. So I was reading her books voraciously all the time. And
you think you were living vicariously through her life?
I lived vicariously through the lives of every book I ever picked up. I didn't have a childhood. My childhood was living in the Little House on the Prairie. My childhood was the Nancy Drew. My childhood was, just...
Now you say that you didn't have a childhood. Now, what do you mean by that?
I was shy. I was in the corner with a book. I just didn't go out there and live. I had a wonderful family. I loved my family so much. I never wanted to leave them or be without them. In fact, when I started first grade, a little girl, my mother was called to the office because I was making the other children cry, especially this one little girl, talking about how much I missed my mother and my dog and my baby brother and sister at home, and I made her cry and she missed her family too. So I've always been, kind of a loner
You're going to be shocked at this.
Yeah.
When I was 13, I remember being our window. We ended up selling the house and living in an apartment complex, and I was with my stepfather, my adopted father. My mother was off with her addiction, but which she would later be healed of. And I remember I heard all the kids outside playing. The pool was right below my bedroom window. I'm on the second floor, and I could hear them playing. And I was so shy. I'd sit there in the summer, and I wouldn't go out to that pool because I was afraid of people. So here's two of us who become on-air personalities.
I know.
We both were painfully shy.
Yeah, I never wanted this. I was so happy to be behind the scenes and be a writer. And, I worked in the television industry. I was a writer for a couple of Nickelodeon shows, but I was a writer. They would put me on camera sometimes. They would ask me to be an extra because I was young. I looked very young, like a kid. And they would put lots of makeup on me, and that was fine. You want to put lots of makeup on me and pretend I'm, Rockarella, Cinderella's evil sister. That was fine with me. I loved it. I love to do things like that. And I love to sing and I love to dance and I was gregarious, but only for myself. I was not the kid that was out there at all, except for in school. When I was in school, it seemed like I knew more than other people. So, because I was such a voracious reader.
Yeah, because you're a reader. Readers
right.
are readers. Now, let me ask you this now.
Readers.
You were brought up as a Jew.
Yeah.
Was it, were you just, now, my niece was brought up in a household very, very affluent, but social Jews. And people who may not understand this, I had the guy who wrote the book Abraham. He came to my home, and #1 best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author. And I realized the reason the Jews, his book was called, one of them was called Abraham, is that the Jews survived by being a collective strength. Moish, you're going to be the jeweler. Hey, Bernie, you're going to do this, and so on. And they stuck together. And that's how the Jews survived. And that's why they also probably inspire a jealousy among others, because they survive by that collective energy. Absolutely. So when you marry outside of Judaism and you're a Jew, you're weakening the foundation. No, making a Jew, you know. And so you were brought up a Jew. Did you go through bat mitzvah? Did you do that whole thing?
Yes. Okay, yeah. Well, it was interesting how I was brought up. I wasn't brought up like in the Jewish section of town like my mother was and my father was. My parents actually moved us into the suburbs of Pittsburgh. And that was really weird because there were no Jews there. And I was the only Jew in school. There was another boy, and he didn't talk about it. No one really knew him or that he was Jewish. I was very proud, and I would educate the other kids in my class about Judaism. And we were not social Jews. We were religious. We were conservative to begin with. Then we became Reformed. There's, different, I don't know if you know about the different kinds of Judaism. But anyway, yes, I had all the education. I went to Hebrew school and Sunday school and bat mitzvah. And we called it Hebrew barf school. We hated it, but still, I did well. Everyone who ever went to Hebrew school knows Hebrew barf school is the way that you really call it. Anyway, I was the leader of my Jewish B'nai B'rith, the BBYO, B'nai B'rith Youth Organization. I was the president of my club. My father was the president of our synagogue. My mother was the president of B'nai B'rith. So, no, we were not just social Jews. We were pretty hardcore.
Okay, so you're brought up Jewish. At what age did you get converted to believe in Jesus as your Messiah, Yeshua as your Messiah?
So that was 2018. So I guess I was 40 something. I don't know.
Oh, really? That late in life?
Yeah.
I was 29 years of age. I thought Jesus was a bunch of hooey. And I was into Eastern religions. And at the age of 14, I read an autobiography of a yogi in Satchidananda. And at 16, I went up to Boston and got inducted into transcendental meditation. But I was out in the woods and I had a light descend upon me. I didn't even know in the scriptures it says,
wow,
beware of the devil because he comes as a light, but a deceptive light. And I didn't even know that, but I knew whatever this was, it wasn't good. And I stopped that whole thing of that Eastern religion stuff. And then it would be at the age of, I would still pray to God. And I'd still have little interventions because I think I was ordained to be his from the beginning of time or before time.
Of course you were.
But at 29, then I had this radical experience in my living room with Leah. So, okay, I'll take a chance that you died and all this stuff. And anyway, so how did you in your 40s? I mean, usually you're pretty rock solid in your beliefs and your foundation.
Actually,
it's a lot for somebody to get converted in the 40s.
Thinking of, I was in my 50s. No, I was in my 50s. I guess I was 53. Yeah, 2018.
What happened?
So I became a show host, as you know, on Facebook. I started doing this show called The Beach Report. And as I was huge following, right? And this is like right before COVID. I started to notice that a lot of crazy stuff was going on. And especially with the social media, people were looking for answers. They were trying to figure out what was wrong. President Trump had been elected, and I know we don't want to get into politics too much. However, I started to educate people about things in the world that I didn't know about either. So I just started reading things, and some of the books that I read would refer to Revelations and end times and stuff like that. And I was like, what is this? What is all this stuff? And a lot of my followers are very religious and follow Christ. And they would kind of explain things to me too. Like I was educating them and they were educating me. And I kept reading all this stuff. And one day, one of my followers, her name is Trish, and Trish actually helps people when they're dying if they